Oh, fantastic. Alrighty. Well, I wanted to start this stream and do this stream today. No, we're having some technical difficulties. I'm going to see if I can figure out a way to actually just, what is it? Share the link to this stream right now because it's going to be different than the one that I originally had on the Instagram, so I apologize for that. That being said, we will be able to, what is it? If anyone has any comments or questions, you can post them here and I will answer them. And we're going to get into the, what is it? Get into the nitty gritty and the details of each of the points that I have here of the basic talisman election checklist. And what is it? So we can start at the beginning, realistically. But let me see if there's an easy way for me to share this link real quick. Because if there is, then I will go do that. Nice. I think, here we go. I can get a shareable link. No, I have done a lot of streaming on Kick, or at least I've done more streaming Kick than I have done on YouTube before. But I wanted to try out and do some streaming on YouTube. So you may not be able to create a story from desktop. So I'm going to briefly just send this link to myself. And then we'll be good to go. But overall, I'd say very excited and pleased with all of the new talismans that are getting created and shared around. I think it's very inspiring to see this magic and to see this, really see this kind of practice just gaining more traction. All right. What is it? There's an old technology proverb from my friend when I was in college. He studied computer engineering and film and all this stuff. And what did he always say? Given an infinite amount of time, technology always works. But if there's ever a discrete, specific amount of time or something, that is when problems arise. And so we are following that. We're following that road at the moment. So thank you everyone for your patience, and we can. We can get to going. Now let us hope that I fixed the feedback problem at the moment. And we'll get to the basic checklist. Perfect. Alrighty. And I have the chat open, so if anyone wants to say anything, please feel free to say anything. Welcome, everybody. And really wanted to go over this checklist. And soon I'm going to switch to views so you can actually we can actually focus on that checklist a bit more. But I wrote in my post today on Instagram the real reason why I wanted to share this. This is something people have asked me about for a while. And back when I was teaching astrological magic in person in Portland, Oregon, back in the glory days of 2019, Jupiter in Sagittarius, this was a list this is a version of this list is something that I would use. So this will be what is it? So this is an interesting blast to the past, but also very, very useful and very, very helpful for determining, is the talisman worth making? Is an election that I'm looking at worth, worth utilizing, worth spending money on materials, my time, effort, energy to create a talisman? And then, in this world of astrological talismanic magic, there definitely does seem to be a spectrum of effects, whether it is, how would you say, is this a middling effect? Could I have gotten this astrological effect through, or this magical effect through another form of magic? Or is it really specific to astrological talismans? People who've been doing this a long time, I think of Chris Warnock, I think of Caitlin Kopic, I think Austin, Cliff Lowe. These are certain people, Palace and Rain of Idola Stellarum, and that sort of thing. Everyone who's been doing this for a while, you end up getting very uncanny, interesting, almost miraculous experiences. I think it was Cliff who, the first time I heard thinking about, with this magic, you have the ability to create multiple once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generational sort of events, and that's why this magic is great. And then Caitlin Kopic of Spear and Sundry, she recently posted something, I think alluding to this with her Thelema Mundi release about, this was a once-in-a-generational magical thing that was created because of astrological magic. Hey Gabe, thank you for the chat. Awesome, star. This is one of the once-in-a-generational things that we're able to do, and I find this to be true as well. Happy to see. Bada bing. So let's get into the actual checklist. As many people will tell you, there is no such thing as a perfect election, and there's no such thing as a perfect talisman, and that's very much true. It's nearly impossible to get an election that follows all these principles, but we're going to walk through them. If you want a copy of yourself, I believe in the description I should have a link on my website where you can download this, so please download it, and let me change views and we can drill down. Perfect. All right. So there are 15 points. I think we're going to go through most of them. Today I'll try not to, belabor anything, but, each of these points are essential. And I think some of these are unusual compared to what may be typical, what may be typically thought of as the best way to make an election. But, unlike... these aren't just aphorisms I copied out of a book and put into a PDF and then saying, hey, you can download this. Not at all. These are, principles that come from the classical texts, but, actually battle tested in real life with real clients, real people, real lives. And these things do seem to be making a significant effect in the lives of those who use it. So... I separated the list into two different categories, that being ones that are positives and then ones that are negatives. And so if you add up all the positives, they should outweigh the number of negatives you have in your election. And if you have more positives than negatives, hey, make the talisman. So the first key thing when making a talisman is, you need your main planetary significator dignified. and how it's dignified gets to be up to you. Whether that's in domicile and rulership, in exaltation, and then the lesser practice dignities of triplicity, term, face, and then there's the early degrees of domicile, first 3 degrees. Sometimes are believed to be even more powerful than the regular degrees of domicile. I also neglect to mention what is it? Domain of DOE, domain of exaltation. The exact degrees in exaltation where a planet is believed to return to the degrees it was at the symbolic creation of the universe. Those are said to be particularly potent. But for your talisman, you just need it to be in one of these, ideally, and that should be that should be sufficient. Point number 2, even more of a bonus. Have your main planetary significator applying to benefic planets. So the greater benefics and the lesser benefic, greater benefic Jupiter, lesser benefic Venus. If you have a planet applying to those, if your significator is applying to those through aspect, that's going to be beneficial. Also, if it's applying to the lot of fortune or its planetary ally, then you're pretty good. In a lot of cases, the planetary allies are similar to the benefic planets. As for an example, one of the sun's planetary allies is Jupiter. Marcello Ficino would refer to the sun and Jupiter as emanations, or not emanations, but as the vehicles of the divine, and his ideas of God were tied to the supposedly benefic natures of sun and Jupiter. So those with afflicted suns, they can really lean into that temperate heat that Jupiter provides in order to have beneficial effect. But the planetary ally section of point 2 makes more sense if you have something like Saturn. Sure, Saturn applying to a benefic planet, Venus or Jupiter, that's good. But what's the planetary ally of Saturn? Based off of Picatrix, you can derive that Mercury is a good ally in that way. Otherwise, if you dip your toes into Jyotish, then there are a lot of signs and textual references to Venus being a planetary ally of Saturn. Shukra, what's a famous story about Shukra, planetary Venus? Sukracharya, the guru, the charya, the acharya, the teacher to the demons, the teacher to the damned, to the asuras, to those spirits. So you have that interesting, like, chthonic, underworldy connection between Venus and Saturn in the Jyotish tradition as well. So that's something to consider depending on your sensibilities. But for a more mainline planetary ally of Saturn, that would be Mercury. All right, now for our third point. Yes. So having the moon dignified or having your moon unafflicted, this is also key. So you want the moon applying aspects to the main significator. Kind of doesn't matter which one it is. Ideally, if it's a trine or sextile, that's going to be the best. But you start to, people who are really doing this, you can really start asking them their sensibilities of, would you rather have an applying square or opposition of the moon to your planetary significator versus no aspect whatsoever, or versus a separating aspect? Those are real opinions that people are going to have. And for me, the more of that juice that I can get with the moon and the main planetary significator, that's what I love. That's what I want. That's what I'm doing the magic. I want there to be signs of effect. I want there to be some level of upheavals in this way. If we're just doing this magic to have a very easy life with no obstacles and no, just no changes, then is that ever really possible? I don't really think so. So if we're trying to optimize for this, hyper easy life, I think we're kind of doomed to fail a little bit. That may just be my sensibilities and my perspective. But this is one of the thoughts that I have when it comes to do I take a talisman with a moon that is applying via opposition or square to my main planetary significator? I would consider that beneficial. I'd consider that a plus based off of experience and based off of what is it? The more medieval rules that focus more on the what is the planet that is making the aspect versus what is the nature of the aspect itself. And applying to the main significator is only one thing as well. We could also have it apply to benefic planets, apply to the lot of fortune, have it be in an angular house or in the 5th or 11th houses. So we have some wiggle room in terms of what determines the moon being in a good spot. All right. Point 4. We want the moon traveling fast, traveling at or above 13 degrees of daily motion. This was really interesting. Recently, I think Chris Warnock made a post about saying, or made a video, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but he was talking about how I believe in his perspective, the moon never really is moving that slowly, which is interesting because there are texts which we'll talk about, like below average daily degrees of daily motion, which I think is around 12 or 12.5 for the moon. Either the magic isn't going to work or it's particularly good for like malefic or evil things. And if we're making talismans for ourselves and our friends, we're not trying to make lives worse in any which way. No, we still want to be on what to do. Point 5. We want to have the moon's lord unafflicted. So this is where things start to get even more complicated, where we have our main planetary significator, we have the moon, and then, well, what sign is the moon in? If the moon is not in, Cancer, or not in exaltation in Taurus, we're going to have to take a look at, well, what is the condition of the planet of the moon's ruler? So if the moon is in Scorpio, well, probably don't want to make a moon talisman with the moon in Scorpio. Well, the moon is in Virgo, then we have to say, well, what is the condition of Mercury? If it is applying to its lord Mercury, or if Mercury is in a beneficial sign, exalted, or in a place of dignity, like if Mercury was in Gemini, this would be fantastic. This would be great. This means that the one in charge of the moon's behavior and the moon's ability to get the magic flowing is great. So that would be a good beneficial aspect to have. And this in the same way that I was talking about point 3, of where it's where the moon could be making aspects of the main significator, benefic planets, the lot of fortune, be in an angular house or in the 5th or 11th houses, that all of those considerations can then be mapped over and applied to the Lord of the Moon. All right, point 6. So this is very key. This is very essential. And if I was to rank these a bit on, and this is probably something I'll do later, because these aren't ranked by priority. This, I would say, is something to very much be particular about, which is having the Ascendant's Lord unafflicted, having a very strong L1. This is key. This is very much essential. I believe Picatrix also talks about how the Ascendant also is a significator of the magician, of the magus who's performing the rite, of the ultimate outcome of the problem at hand. And so, if you are making a talisman, you want it to be strong. You want the wishes to be fulfilled. So you need to make sure the Ascendant is very strong. One may think, in what circumstances is your Ascendant even have the chance to be? Have the chance to not be strong? Well, if you're making a talisman with the significator on on the midheaven, on the MC, which is typical for lunar talismans or lunar mansion talismans, fixed star talismans in that way. Those who don't like to have the moon on the ascendant, which is a whole thing that we'll get into later, then special consideration needs to be taken in terms of the L1 or the ascendant ruler. That ruler needs to be in good condition. And we've been doing a lot of talking about, well, what is good condition? Applying aspects to the main significator, applying good aspects to the moon, applying aspects to benefic planets, yada yada, etc., etc. And number 7, so this is the last of the extra special beneficial qualities, and that is having Saturn, Venus, or Jupiter rising on the ascendant. So Venus and Jupiter, benefic planets. Benefic planets make sense on the ascendant. That's fortifying the ascendant. That's making it stronger. There's also some passages in Pikatrix where it talks about that benefic planets on the ascendant remedy afflictions of the moon. So some of these points are sort of not necessarily more important, but they fix each other, or they can shore up deficiencies within your election. It's very great to have a benefic on the ascendant. If you're able to do that, that should definitely help. Now, thinking of that logic, it may be odd to consider having Saturn on the ascendant. Saturn is a malefic planet, the greater malefic. Why do we want that rising? Well, I believe it's Lilly there, William Lilly, in Christian astrology. There's a section where he talks about that Saturn on the ascendant, or Saturn in the first house, signifies, like, brings the stability of Saturn to a working. And this is fantastic. In the magic that we perform and what we do, we want to have a stable, successful result, regardless. We don't want just a flash in the pan of good luck or good fortune. We want that to be ever enduring. And when we think about the mythos and the just that pure resonance of Saturn as the immovable, chthonic, earthy being God that Saturn is, of course we want that as the foundational result of all of our magic, of anything we do in life. So in that way, it's what is it? A no-brainer in terms of having Saturn on the ascendant there. And this is something I've done a lot, and I absolutely love it. And then we'll get to the opposite of that, which is having the moon on the ascendant. In the way that Saturn, it's the farthest planet away from us. It's the slowest planet. It's the most immovable because it is so far away. The moon is closest. It's the most, changing, wishy-washy in that way. And so some people will consider moon on the ascendant as a detriment to the election. But we'll get to that in the next section, which is things to avoid in this way. So what is it? One thing you definitely don't want is to have your main planetary significator debilitated. So in the sign of fall or detriment whatsoever. In specific malefic terms, that's also I advise against that. Malefic faces or applying to malefics. I think a really good example is Mercury in the third face of Virgo. Mercury in Virgo, this is great. This is highly dignified. However, the third face of Virgo signifies, paleness, as well as the, what is it? I think it's the loss of limbs, which is pretty wild. I actually have a family member with this placement. And what is it? Thankfully, they have not lost their limbs, but they are incredibly pale. So that explains my own constitution in that way. So in a perspective of natal astrology, a lot of these delineations aren't so, they aren't so deterministic. And I think talismanic magic and talismans have the ability for it to become, or for it to be a bit more deterministic than than natal astrology itself. That being said, it's hard to know for certain. This is a spiritual science. It is, oh my gosh, trying to think of the word. It escapes me. This is an empirical study to a certain degree, but to fully understand the causality of everything that we do is something that is a bit hidden. It is a cult in that way. That being said, I haven't been making third decan Mercury Virgo talismans and giving them to people. And people who have done special electional work, astrological magic work with Mercury in the third decan of Virgo has not been good. Has actually resulted in those unfortunate circumstances, loss of limbs, which is unfortunate. So that's why I have this point here, cautioning against the malefic faces. Number 2 to definitely avoid. Having your main planetary significators apply to malefic planets, Saturn, Mars, planetary enemies in particular. This makes sense. If you in life there's always going to be obstacles, but we don't need to be pumping in the probability of having the worst kinds of obstacles present in our lives. And a lot of the time Saturn and Mars represents and will bestow some of the worst obstacles. Some of the worst obstacles possible. And planetary enemies, as well. It depends on your tradition, but in Picatrix you can sort of figure that out a little bit. There is a lot of relationship between Mercury and Venus as planetary enemies, which I would say the conflict that creates from planetary enemies, it is unavoidable conflict in terms of it's something that one must be able to overcome, or one will have to overcome in order to get the desired result. And like I was saying before, in life this is sort of a given. We're going to have to learn how to handle these things anyway. But if we can prevent ourselves from creating talismans that specifically focus on that, the better. All right, number 3, having the moon afflicted. Yes, definitely not good in this way. So in many of the ways before, we had talked about the ways that makes the moon supported. A lot of that, if you reverse them, then you have the afflicted versions of it. So instead of having the moon applying to aspects of the main significator, these are the times when the moon is separating from the main significator. You definitely don't want that. The moon having a separating aspect to the significator is like, all of the good things, all of that collaborative energy, all being in the past, all things that have happened. And a mechanism for talismanic magic that is proposed, which, is an interesting proposal to consider, happens to be, if you're pumping in probability of your reality, probability of your reality. You want things to be most likely to happen or most likely to occur now. You don't want it to live in a situation where all of the best circumstances of your life have happened in the past. That's definitely not what you want. Then it's like, oh, back in the good old days. We want the good old days to be right here, right now, today, not yesterday. And with talismanic magic, I think you have the ability to kind of create that. You could create really good talismans that feel good, but actually create circumstances to where the best times of your life were in the past, which maybe some people really like that or really need that, but does not seem to be the case. So that's my one commentary on the separating aspects. Anything else that's worth saying? Making separating aspects the main significator. Separating from benefic planets, you get that same feeling there. Separating a lot of fortune. I would still make a talisman even if it was separating a lot of fortune. That's not a deal breaker. In a cadent adverse house to the ascendant, that is... it depends on the essential dignity of the moon. There are times where the moon is in bad, debilitated condition otherwise, and if you put it in a cadent house, it kind of slows it down or captures it. So that could be a beneficial situation. You'd want that. And then the adverse houses to the ascendant, the 8th or the 12th. You certainly want, it's nice to be able to see the effects of your magic. It's nice to be able to really see and feel the effects of your talismans. So preventing the adverse nature of the moon to the ascendant helps with that. And then applying to malefic planets or fixed stars. So, if it's applying to Saturn or Mars, not good. In the same way, you don't want your main significator applying to Saturn or Mars. And then malefic fixed stars. I think Algol is the only thing that comes to my mind. Unless you're making an Algol fixed star talisman, you don't want your your moon in Algol or conjunct Algol at all. Number 4 here is having the moon slow. So traveling at or below 12.5 degrees of daily motion, which is the average motion there. I'll mention this again because there may be new people, but I think I recently heard from a conversation with Chris Warnock, who is the whole reason why astrological magic and talismanic magic has like a resurgence. He, I don't think, was very convinced that the moon can ever be so slow it's not usable. So that's certainly a perspective there. I think Picatrix mentions that if the moon moves too slow, or a slow-moving moon represents malefic workings or unfortunate workings. So when we're making talismans for ourselves and others, we don't really want to do that. If the moon is too slow, realistically, you have the danger and the nature of it, of just no magic happening. That has certainly been my experience with making these talismans. Point 5, having the moon's lord afflicted. So all the things that could happen to the moon that are bad, all of the aspects that could be making with other planets or fixed stars, house placement, we can apply that to the lord of the moon. So again, if the moon was in Virgo, we would have to look at Mercury and see, how is Mercury doing? And then depending on the condition of Mercury, that could be a good reason to not make the talisman. I have made talismans where the Lord of the Moon was heavily afflicted, and those tended to be the talismans that actually would just like break or shatter, or would have a very hard time holding together physically, or they would seem to fizzle out. Though I recently found one that I had made, one of my original first ones that I really do attribute a lot of my success in the world of singing and Indian classical music, and it definitely still seemed to have a lot of good juice in it. But I've repaired that one multiple times. But that was one I made with, I believe, the Lord of the Moon was fully afflicted, and it's been a very stressful talisman to love and to hold and that sort of thing. So you really have to be careful with an afflicted moon lord. Because again, especially if this is your first talisman or you don't have a lot of talismans, spending the time, money, effort in order to make one of these it can be a lot. I think I'd say it's not as much as people may think or want you to think, but it is certainly a lot. I don't like waking up at 2 or 4 a.m. for any other reason besides making talismans. So there's at least that. You at least deserve to sleep a little bit more. All right, point 6. So having the ascendant's lord afflicted, yeah, you definitely don't want that at all. So separating aspects from the main significator, separating aspects from the moon, and applying aspects to malefics in a cadent house. Those are all things to consider. Having a very weak ascendant. So this is very interesting because you can make a talismans where the main significator is on the midheaven. Think the moon. And this has been the case with certain fixed star talismans that I've had to make calls on making or not. They can look very, very attractive on paper. And even when you make them, they can feel really, really great. And they can look like lots of great things are happening. But a weak ascendant, we must remember what the ascendant signifies. Does signify the ultimate success of the magical working at hand. So weak L1, weak ascendant ruler, it's not going to work, not going to be good. But it also signifies the magus themselves, the magician, the one making the talisman, even to the point of one's health. So if it is ultimately debilitated, you're kind of sapping your own life force and energy out of the going, whether it's a true vampiric talisman and the energy is going into the talisman there, or just costing you something, costing you some life force in order to have the talisman in your life. Generally not worth it. I have been, what is it? Years ago, I remember being given elections to review from materia, oils and stuff that friends had made for other friends, or interesting practitioners had made for other friends in their network. And they're like, Josh, what do you think of this election? And it's, especially when reviewing other people's work, it's always a delicate situation, because the person making it and the mage plays such a significant role in the making of talismans, of talismanic materia, and all of these sort of things that are elected. But how I always say is, if you are making a talisman, making materia with a weak ascendant, it should potentially have this vampiric quality. It should be draining to the user. And I told the person that, and they were like, oh, I'm like, oh wow, thank you. Yeah, I was a little weirded out by it, but I have this big move during the week, and I'm gonna do it. Gonna use it anyway. And then I believe they did, and then I think they had some very unfortunate circumstances. Ultimately, they were fine, but I think it was some problems on the road, maybe feeling extra tired. The sort of effects you would think about when using really intimately using a talisman or materia that has a highly debilitated ascendant. So I really recommend against that. All right. So 7 and 8, very, very similar. So 7, having Mars rising on the ascendant, not good. You can be of the school of thought that you don't want any malefics on the ascendant. That's a fair perspective to have. I tend to be in the school of Lily, where I really do like Saturn on the ascendant, especially if Saturn is dignified. When Saturn was in Capricorn and Aquarius, I believe I was able to make a couple different talismans with highly dignified, really gracious Saturns on the ascendant. Chef's kiss. They were just so perfect, so great. Really happy I did that. Mars on the ascendant, I believe I have made some talismans with dignified Mars on the ascendant, because they were fixed star talismans, and it was the only way I was going to make them. And they definitely does bring obstacles. It definitely does bring conflict. And unless that's your path and your thing, then you don't need more of that. A lot of the times people want talismans or want this magic because they need some relief. And so having Mars on the ascendant is not for those who want more relief in their lives. That's what I would say. And then finally, point 8 is having Mars or Saturn conjunct the descendant. I'm trying to remember exactly the where this comes from, but there's something along the lines of the planets conjunct the descendant represent the enemy or the adversary. But one can sort of derive this easily if you think about how the first house is going to signify yourself and the power of the working, the ultimate result. The opposite of that is the adversary or the enemy in that way, or the other party. And if the other party that's always involved is a malefic planet, that's a lot of energy, that's a lot of work. That could be potentially detrimental. I need to go through my notes, because there's one talisman I made before this, and I think it was actually a third Lunar Mansion talisman. It was a Lunar Mansion talisman, and it had very, very weird negative effects started to pop up. And it was a year or so later I had looked at the actual election, and what happened was I did make it with Saturn on the descendant, tightly conjunct the descendant. And it was there you go, that's really what's informing this point from practical experience. But there's a lot of other individuals who'll talk about that this really isn't their thing. And a way you sort of figure that out, I remember in this scenario, it happened to there was a lot of obstacles and negative circumstances that started to happen since I had acquired the talisman, but it wasn't related to a lot of the hierarchy of the talisman itself. So the talisman is actually, creating the beneficial good stuff that, I created it for. Those things were good, but then all this other extra misfortune, or unsettling events started to happen, kind of unrelated, but certainly targeted at me and my loved ones, and it was very interesting to try to figure out what was happening. So ultimately, I had to put that talisman to bed and get rid of it. There's a whole process of kind of making your talismans die or disposing of malefic talismans or talismans that aren't and one no longer wants in that sort of way. And that's a whole other thing. But that was a very interesting experience. So overall, those are the 15 points. I think I'll go through my commentary a little bit. But if there's any questions, please message. Please send in the chat. And we'll wrap up here in a bit. If not, but I'll just reiterate. Ideally, you have 1 point for all the positive criteria, and maybe a negative point for each of the negative criteria, and those would add up, or those would double up. So if you had if the moon was afflicted by multiple accounts, then it would be a -1 for each one, not just for it having one that falls under category number 3. And ideally, you want to be making talismans with a positive score. So add up all your positives, subtract your negatives. Voila, if you should be making your talisman or not. And ultimately, this isn't a positive. This isn't a comprehensive list whatsoever. I think I was inspired by the essential dignity and debility lists and notation from William Lilly. Because when I was first starting out, it was really useful to think of like, oh, this election is like a +7 talisman. This is a +12 talisman. And those of us who have that lingering nerddom and love to play D&D, if you're playing Baldur's Gate 3 and all right now, I'll date this video hard, and we love the extra pluses, and so you always want a talisman with as many pluses as possible. But not all pluses, as I mentioned here, are made equal. There are certain negatives here that are worth avoiding versus ones that are really worth avoiding in that way. Let's see. I'll do one more call for questions. If anyone has any specific questions about elections or talismans that you're concerned about, feel free to reach out to me. Send me a message or sign up for a reading. I'd really appreciate that. I make talismans, so if you really want like one of the best talismans that do exist in the modern world, I'd be happy to make one for you. And if you have something very specific, I'm happy to make something or collaborate with you to make something very specific, because I've worked with certain individuals to make true masterpieces of talismanic magic, and so that's something that thankfully I'm available to do. But until then, I think we will, I'll see you all the next time. I'd like to do more live streaming. We'll see how it goes. I think I figured out how this YouTube thing works. But until then, what is it? I'll hold for a second, read the chat, and then we'll wrap up. All right, let's see if there's any good closing thoughts that I have for this. There's a lot more I could say about this. There's a lot of perspectives around. Is there a right way to make a talisman? Is there a wrong way? Is there a true way to make it? And I don't know if there's a true way to really do anything, but it is very, very true that there are better ways to do it than others. And if you are holding oneself accountable and really wanting to provide the best results for others, because for ourselves, there's many ways we can, as individuals, live our lives to live the best lives we personally individually can. But if you're looking to do that at scale for many people, that's why I think this magic is so incredibly powerful and really, really great, because it has the potentiality to really overturn the suffering for so many people. In De Imaginibus, there are recipes for creating talismanic cities. How does one create a city or a dwelling imbued with the celestial blessings of reality? that is the kind of potentiality this magic has that isn't the case with everything else. So that's what I believe should be driving our need and desire for making these things. And so I provide this list, informed by years of, my what is it? Trials and tribulations, just to benefit. So please enjoy, please use. Let me know how it goes, and until next time, see you on the other side. Oh, you're welcome, game. Always happy to do a stream. Alrighty, have a good one, y'all.